What's up guys, welcome back to Just Pure Cars. You join me in the Type R today. Now regular viewers of this channel will know that I've had the Type R for some time now, and that is an FN2 model. I've seen a few comments over the last few weeks from a bunch of you saying that you're also in the market for buying an FN2 Type R, and whether I had any advice of what to look for once going to look at used cars. So I thought it was about time I made a buyer's guide on the FN2. Now first off, you might wonder what we mean by Type R FN2 and Type R EP3. Now without getting really super boring, essentially it's the different generations of Type R. The EP3 was the original, released back in 2003, and it's commonly known as the red band looking car. It was really well regarded amongst enthusiasts, rave reviews, and just an all-round awesome car. Now the FN2 model, which is what I've got here, came about in 2007, and it's what Honda did to continue that journey of the Type R, and there was big hype around it. People were expecting really big things, and a lot of people actually thought Honda was going to go bigger and better and more power than they did with the EP3, which had already been a really successful car. Now what they did was surprising to some, is they kept the formula really. They kept the engine the same 2 litre naturally aspirated petrol engine using VTEC technology, output of 198 brake horsepower, and that gives you a top speed of about 146 miles an hour and 0 to 62 in about 6.8 seconds. Very similar numbers to the original EP3, and they did this for one specific reason: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I can't blame them for that, and I think they've made a fantastic job of making this FN2 model just as good as the EP3. Now what they have done is obviously updated the styling massively. As you'll see, it is very different looking from the original red band look. Actually the styling is maybe a little bit out there for its time back in 2007. It's very futuristic, but I think actually if you look at it today, it looks just as modern today as it did back then. So I mean, for what is essentially a 10-year-old car, alright, this version has a slight facelift, a few minor tweaks, but nothing major. It still looks fresh and very different on the road, so hats off Honda. I think you've done a really good job there. Now, as I said, I'm going to put together this buyer's guide. Now, I am in no way, stretch of imagination, an expert when it comes to mechanical engineering or automotive mechanics, but there's a few things that I would always look for when it comes to buying a used car. And I've been online, I've done a bunch of research to see what the experts are saying is the key things to look for and any common faults. So here is my rundown of what are those key things you should look for when you're looking for a used FN2 Type R. Okay, so the first up, the engine. Now, the 2 litre VTEC engine from Honda is near bulletproof. I remember seeing some stats many years ago. I mean, this was probably like 10, 15 years ago, that they had produced over 1 million VTEC engines and had not a single failure. So, you know, Japanese technology is going to be robust. However, with the Type R, some of the early examples, and this was across the EP3 and the FN2, were a little bit hungry on oil. So what drivers had to do was continually check the oil levels just to make sure they were just below that upper level, just to make sure that they weren't going to run into any problems. There was a few issues in the past where, especially EP3 models, had just done, say, a 3,000 mile service, and then they had engine problems. The engines blew because the drivers just assumed the oil was fine and hadn't checked it. So my tip is to always check the oil level anyway, but what you want to look for is something just below the upper limit. If the oil isn't at that point, chances are it hasn't been cared for, and you might want to think again. Definitely something you don't want to have a problem with. I mean, going on with that about looking after the car, the service book goes without saying, always check the history on the car. Ideally, you want to find a model that has a full Honda service history. The intervals for this car is every 12,500 miles or 12 months, depending on what comes first. So for example, this car, it's a 2009 model. It's only done 38,000 miles, but I've just done the 100,000 mile service on it because time caught up with it rather than miles. So I've made sure it's kept up to date. The previous owners have done the same, full Honda service history throughout. So check the book, make sure it's got the stamps in it. At the very least, you want all the stamps. Ideally, you want them to be Honda stamps, but yeah, it depends on the car and obviously the price. Then next up we have the gearbox. Now again, some of the early examples had issues with third gear, where the synchro mesh wouldn't blend and it would jump out of third. So make sure you drive the car and you really check that it goes home to third properly and doesn't drop out. Now they did fix this in later updates, but always best to just check to make sure there's no historical problems there. Alongside the engine, there was a few problems in the early days with the starters. Now this has push button start, and some of those early examples weren't having trouble starting on the first push of the button. They weren't engaging the flywheel. So make sure that the car starts at the first press of that button. Also, and that there's no delay. So some cars had say battery drain problems, and you'll know if this is an issue. If the car's been sat for a couple of days and then you go to start it and it sounds like it's struggling, you know there might be a problem there. 9 times out of 10 it'll be fine, but again, just worth checking to make sure it does start on the push of the button. Okay, going back to the gearbox then. Clutch, you should have a nice smooth clutch action. If you hear any creaks or groans, chances are it could be a worn release bearing. It's not a massive deal, it's not a big expensive fix, but if it's not there, that's better than having it there, right? So just keep an eye out for that, and obviously if it's really stiff, then think twice about it. And then the paintwork. Now, the paint on these Honda cars historically has been thin, so all it takes is a little stone chip, and it will chip the paint. So you want to make sure that any stone chips haven't been touched in. If they haven't, then it could be obviously a cause for rust in the future. But if they have been taken care of, then it just won't be a problem. You'll be fine. And then the electrics. Now it's a Japanese car, so the electrics are going to be fairly sound. But make sure, it goes without saying, that everything works. So make sure the digital dash is working fine. If it's got sat nav, make sure that's working okay. Most importantly, check the folding mirrors. Now they're manual folds, you press the button and they fold in. There have been a few issues where the motors will fail, and they're individual motors as well, so one will work, one won't. So check them by pressing the button. If they are seeming really slow to operate or not operating at the same speed, chances are one of the motors is on its way out. Again, not a huge expensive fix, can be done in 5 minutes, but just that will be an extra expense for you down the road, so just make sure they're working fine. And then the interior, all of the models came with Alcantara bucket seats like this, so just check for general wear and tear, any rubbing on the side of the bolsters, and obviously just wear and tear around the cabin itself. I mean, that's pretty standard for most cars. You want to make sure you've got a nice tidy interior, and I think this is such a nice interior. To get one which is in strong condition is ideal. Okay, and the next thing, it's not a massive thing, but the original tyres that came on the car were Bridgestone Potenzas. In the early ones, it was the REO50s, and then later on it was the S001s. Now, the only reason I say this is because they're really well suited to the car and they're really sticky, and this car's got them. So you can tell if a car's got those tyres, then it's probably been looked after with somebody that wanted it to be as Honda intended and not messed around with, and they spent the money on it. And also, as with any car, check that the tyres are the same, at least the same brand across the axles. If they're different front to back, less of an issue, but cross axle they must be the same, just to make sure you get consistent grip. But ideally you will have those Bridgestone Pretenders on there for the best experience. And then finally, modifications. Now personally, I like cars which are stock. Not to say I wouldn't ever modify a car, and there's amazing mods available for the Type R, not expensive ones either, that can get some great performance out of it. But always have that buyer beware philosophy when it comes to modified cars. Check for paperwork. Make sure that the work's been done by a really good company that you can trust the quality of their work. If it looks like it's been on the cheap, just, if I was you, if in doubt, walk away. And I think that's my advice completely. If in doubt, always walk away, or at least seek professional advice from someone like the RAC or an independent garage that can do a true independent inspection and make sure that the car is sound. But you know, other than that, you will not go wrong for the money. These are so much fun, and you can pay, depending on the age and miles, between £5,000 and £10,000, and you'll have an amazingly fun car, truly capable, really practical as well, and I can't recommend them enough. So I hope this guide has helped a little bit. If any of you are out there and you're looking to buy a Type R FN2 model, if you've got any comments, leave them below. If you're a subscriber, thanks for watching again, and if you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button for more content in the future. And with that, I'll leave you to it, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers guys, see you later.